Colossians 3 verses 18 through 21 is a practical passage that describes how a Christian's confession of the lordship of Jesus Christ in his life must be made manifest in his daily life. This specific passage breaks it down or narrows it down into the familial context or the familial unit. So the structure of this passage, these 4 verses, is a vocative noun, which is an address, followed by an imperative verb, which is a command. So the first one is, wives, be subject or submit yourselves to your husbands. Number 2, husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered towards them. Number 3, children, obey your parents in all things. And number 4, fathers, do not provoke your children lest they become discouraged. So when we read all 4 of those and we look at them, and you kind of see it just from reading it, that there's an underlying reoccurring theme of humility, of selflessness. And so we'll break that down a little bit. First, it takes humility as a wife to submit to your husband. It's unnatural. We are prideful. We are sinful. So we think it's our way is best. We don't want to necessarily submit to others when we don't agree with them. And so that's why it takes humility to do that. Number 2, with some intertextuality, we see that a husband is supposed to love his wife in the same way that Christ loved the church and even gave his life for her. We see that in Paul's letter to the Ephesians. Now, given this insight, what Paul is saying to the husbands at the church of Colossae is to love their wives self-sacrificially. And this goes against, this is a love that unconditionally puts someone else before yourself. And that's not always natural for us. It's not always easy for us because we are prideful, we are sinful, we want what's best for us, we want to look out for ourselves first and foremost. That's not what Christ calls us to do as his followers. That's not what he did. He looked out for others above himself. He was very humble. He was very selfless. Number 3, it takes humility for children to recognize the God-given roles between a parent and a child and to obey their parents. And this is one that everybody can probably relate to at some point in their life, not wanting to obey their parents. I mean, that's something we all experience, and it really can take setting aside your desires to do what you were told to do, or do what you're supposed to do, or what your parents have told you you're supposed to do. And obviously, when Paul writes to obey your parents, he means in things that are godly. Obviously, if your parents are telling you to do something that's not godly, no, you would not need to obey that. This is as your parents are following the Lord and they're instructing you to follow the Lord, you are to obey them. And sometimes that really takes setting aside your own desires and doing what you're told to do. And that takes humility and selflessness. And then last, it's very common to hear or to say that a father is the head of a household. And this is how God designed it. And he did that because it's a picture of his own headship over our lives. However, it's important to recognize that a father is not to abuse that position of authority. He is to acknowledge that position of authority, and he's to accept that position of authority, but he is to do it with a posture of humility and selflessness. And a father will show his selflessness when through his consideration for his children, when he doesn't provoke them. So earlier in Colossians, before this passage, Paul wrote about the new self that a Christian is to become when he is conformed, or as he is conformed, into the likeness of Christ. Now, as he describes the manifestations of our faith in Christ, we can see an obvious characteristic is that we are to adopt humility.